You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. So happy to have with us today Robert Charles. Bobby Charles served in the Reagan and Bush 41 White Houses as Assistant Secretary of State under Colin Powell and counsel to the U.S. House National Security Subcommittee for 5 years. He's also a former litigator. He taught law at Harvard University's Extension School, and he recently authored a beautiful book called Eagles and Evergreens. I recommend that anybody who hasn't read the book, go ahead and get that book, Eagles and Evergreens. Bobby Charles, thank you so much for joining us today. I was speaking to our listeners a couple weeks back, and I was telling them how, AMAC is supported by some really smart people, one of them being you. And you and I have become friends over the years, Bobby. I turn to you often, a team of people here at AMAC, consult with you on a regular basis to really get a better understanding the issues that are important to our members and how we can best tackle those issues. And you've brought such incredible insight. You also do a lot of work, appear on Fox News and other major media outlets. And you've been a great spokesperson for AMAC throughout the years. So I thank you for that, Bobby. Welcome to today's show.
Well, thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for a beautiful introduction, but also for doing this show, because I think people need to get the news that they're not going to get from any other place. And sometimes I think AMAC is sort of the island in the ocean where you can still go for rock solid news and really get what's really happening.
That's true. And Bobby, you give us great content as well. Just a wonderful writer. So many of your articles are treasured by our membership. You bring great insight. The reason why we're talking today, Bobby, is really to discuss H.R. 1. This is a massive piece of legislation that the Democrats have promised to make their number one priority in the 117th Congress. I've read the bill. I've looked through it. And what I see is another way in which the Democrats are looking to police speech, if I could be so bold and call it that, because that's what it reads to me, as well as undermining our elections. I don't think that some of the things that this bill allows for example, it allows for the harvesting of ballots. It allows for minimal verification for mail-in ballots. And these are the very issues that we and almost, I think all Americans recognize that our elections need to be cleaned up. We need to clean up our voter rolls, and we need to clean it up state by state. But this bill, H.R. 1, has me concerned. I did speak a little bit a few days ago I ran through some of the highlights of the bill. Bobby, I'd like for you to share with our members, if you can give us sort of big picture and then maybe drill down a little bit into the specific areas of the bill that are most concerning to you. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so excellent point, and great to have selected this particular piece of legislation as a topic of conversation. Maybe many of our members and viewers, when they were kids, played tug of war, and there comes a moment when the tug can trigger a kind of a cascading effect, and one side loses really big. And the momentum starts to move that way. The Democrats believe that they have that momentum right now, and what they're trying to do with this bill, while everybody's looking sideways and a little preoccupied by impeachment and by the newness of a new administration, they want to ram this thing through with their majority and basically solidify what amounts to one-party control as it reflects both free speech and electoral reform, just electoral process, just the way you described.
Right.
So I will get into details, but let me say that the big picture is that I think our members need to be aware that as tired as we are, as difficult as it is to maintain stamina under duress, we're tested. Americans who believe in this country have always been tested, and it's in those moments when we're most tired that we have to grab our inner selves and really rally to push back. This is one of those moments. Why? Because this bill, as you described, does two things. The first thing it does is it opens the door to restrictions on First Amendment rights, in particular free speech. But that, of course, cascades into everything else that's in the First Amendment. And what does it do? It forces, so one of the particulars is that it forces the disgorgement of all names of all donors that have participated in or contributed to conservative political action committees. And then there's a bunch of flow down organizations that it also disgorges the names of. Now, why would that matter? It seems innocuous, except in a day and age where, oh, by the way, and the addresses of those people.
Mm.
So in an age when doxing happens and people show up on people's lawns with all kinds of things that we don't think is quite right in terms of intimidation, and people get canceled at their jobs, they get canceled in their speaking engagements, they get canceled all over the place. This is an intent. The intent is very transparent. It's an intent to intimidate conservative thinkers, speakers, donors, voters into essentially not participating in those groups. And if they do participate, paying a very high price. I'm as concerned, and there are more pieces on the First Amendment front, and I'll get to those in a second, but I'm also deeply concerned about what it does on the electoral process side. Now, keep in mind that the way the Constitution is configured, these decisions are typically made and are supposed to be made at the state level. They're not supposed to be federalized. So if I am the governor of a state and I'm working with the legislature of a state, and we would like to push mail-in ballots, and we think there should be a reason for having a request for mail-in ballots. So in the last cycle, 6 states out of 44 stayed with that protocol and said, no, you can't get a ballot unless you give us a reason for an absentee ballot. The 44 kind of caved the other way. Well, now that prerogative would be taken away from states, and there would be a mandate that they should be able to do that, and then flow down the mandates. They would ban voter IDs across the country. Well, what about the states who say we don't really want illegal aliens voting in this state, particularly when they're coming over our border in higher numbers? We're not very happy about that. We don't want a same-day voting because that creates the potential for multiple registrations on that same day and no way to check. And if you do check with provisional ballots, which some states would have to issue, they'd be in the tens of thousands. Very costly for a state. Same thing with online registration, very readily subject to fraud. Same thing with, okay, and here's another piece in this bill. They push for one-party control of the FEC. Well, the Federal Election Commission has always been evenly split, and you can say, well, gosh, that's a terrible thing because it's all deadlocked. They don't come down hard one way or the other on a lot of things. Well, if it's a bipartisan problem, they come down hard on it. But if it's just going to affect one party badly, they don't do that. And so they obviously want to game that system. They want to institutionalize early voting so that you'll never get the end of the cycle. You can keep pushing it backwards in time and get people to vote as soon as they can. They want automatic DMV voting, which means that if you're an illegal alien and you get your driver's license, they're going to automatically enroll you. By the way, I want to point this out, and this is a vital fact and why we should all be fighting against this HR1 monolith, this giant, a lot of M words come to, mammoth is a good word, okay? Monstrous is a good word. The ACLU, not known for being conservative, and the Wall Street Journal both have come out against this bill.
That's good to know. That's important for us to know,
And the Wall Street Journal said very clearly, this is like auto registration of all Democrats. And that's what the point is with things like DMV voting, registration. The other two provisions that really trouble me is that they open the door to felon voting. So what we're now going to cater with criminal justice acts that release people from prison. I mean, that doesn't seem quite like the right way to prioritize American citizens' top priorities. But and then the last piece they do is they open the door to 16-year-olds registering to vote. So, my feeling about this is it's an attempt to institutionalize many of the things that we saw in 2020 that we know naturally increase the propensity for fraud.
That's exactly right. And anybody who looks at the bill, anybody who really studies those bullet points that you just mentioned, they'd be hard pressed to really justify why they think it's necessary, except to say that it quiets the conservative voices in America and allows for what it appears to be one-party rule. Because if these things happen, as you've said, and we've got illegals coming over, look at what's happened when Biden was inaugurated. there were dozens, there were hundreds of people trying to get over the border, really believing, oh, Biden's going to let us right on in. So who do we think that the illegals are going to vote for? The ones that are making promises to them, free this and free that. So it really, I'm so glad that you mentioned those things on the election integrity. You're going to get into the censorship, the privacy issues that we see in this bill, but the threat to our election, I think this bill is bad. And what I'm concerned about, Bobby, and curious what your thoughts are, there are such thin margins right now. Votes are getting passed with 2 or 3 votes. Do you think that we'll have enough moderate Democrats that recognize that this bill is bad for America? Do
So
you have
three
any thought
very,
there?
I do. And again, a very poignant question, and one that is very timely right now for our members to be thinking about. Three sort of straightforward points. First is that, you know, um, people think very short term right now. I mean, in the market, they think about the next quarterly returns. In the political world, they think about what they can ram and jam and get done right now.
Mm.
And the problem is that that's not the way our framers thought about the Constitution, and it's not the way most Americans actually think about it. They think about our Constitution as sort of a continuity of operations, a way to go forward through time and keep the principles steady. The problem we've got right now is that if we don't get a few moderates who realize, like Joe Manchin or Sinema or some of the others in the Senate in particular, this has already passed in the House, not this cycle, but in a prior cycle. So we know that it'll just get pushed right through the House on a party line vote. But if you can get a few of the thoughtful Democrats who are in the moderates in the Senate, and there are a few who say, in 2 years or 4 years, we're going to be in this position. And if we ram and jam things here in this way, and they happen to get the majority again, and the numbers look better in 2 years for us to get the majority in the Senate, then we're going to face the piper here. We're going to end up having to swallow what we pushed on others to swallow. So that's the first observation I'll make. And I think it gives us some hope that some moderates will be sensible. The second observation is that, having spent time behind the Iron Curtain many years ago in the
Yes.
Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia and East Germany and places like that, you see, I mean, you don't have to be a scholar of history. All you have to do is sort of take it from those who saw it firsthand, that this is the way one-party rule begins. And by the way, the same thing is true in a fascist country. It's ironic, but Nazi Germany was actually a socialist country. And then, it became very dictatorial and horrific. But the same thing is true of the Soviet Union. And so the problem is one-party rule. Democracy is fragile. And if you don't maintain the integrity of a two-party process, or contrary opinions being welcomed, then what you're unable to do is you're unable to fix problems. You're unable to correct mistakes that one party's making, for starters. And secondly, you're unable to block the idea of power consolidation in order to oppress. And so that's why democracy, a republic, is so vital. It allows the self-correcting processes to come back and to protect American liberties, but it would be any country, but liberties that the individual has, God-given liberties. The last thing I'm going to say is about First Amendment and the privacy piece, and what a precarious moment we're in. There are a lot of
It
people who
is.
might say, gosh, HR 1, it can't stop me from saying what I want to say. Well, I mean, that's the instinct of all of us Americans, right? We grew up speaking our mind, and
Right.
by offending now and again and being offended now and again, we allow ourselves to think more broadly than we would otherwise think. And sometimes we get to truth that way, which is what our framers wanted. If you look at the January 2021 policies that have been promulgated by social media, and I'm talking about multiple social media platforms, it is shocking. These are January 21 policies that now make it their standard practice to remove anyone who talks about electoral integrity. These are written down policies that if you talk about vote rigging, if you talk about public corruption in the environment of an election, your posting will be removed. Now, that, to me, in tandem with HR 1, is like, it's like putting a starter fuse with an explosive. I mean, this is a bad thing. This is allowing the First Amendment to be suppressed through this sort of public-private partnership, if you will, between the social media Democrat left-leaning crowd and the government. And it's an end around. It's a sleight of hand. It's an attempt to use the private sector in such a way that they can suppress matters of public interest and discussions on matters of public concern. And what matter, honestly, Rebecca, what matter is more important to the future of a democracy than the integrity of our elections?
That's right. And if we're convinced, if people are brainwashed, so to speak, because the truth is not getting to them and the truth is suppressed, uh, and we are made to believe that there is no issue with our elections,
Yep.
well, then you look at HR1 and you say, I won't be so worried. And that's my biggest fear, is that, I've been saying over and over again, when our freedom of speech is threatened, I think one way that we can combat that is more speech. And AMAC is not going to be quiet on the issue. We're going to be very thoughtful. We're going to try to work across the aisle, but we really want to educate Americans, and we want to bring our members' voice to Washington and say, wait a minute, we're not happy. We're not comfortable with this. And we are aware. And that should be encouraged in America. I think that we want to encourage thought. We want to provoke thought. We want people to have differing opinions. As you said it, Bobby, it gets us to the truth. Now, I have another question. Let's suppose this passes in the Senate. Do you think that there could be some pretty smart people out there that say, wait a minute, this is not constitutional. This is unconstitutional, and perhaps file some sort of lawsuit? What could that look like if this were to happen?
Yep. So three very quick points again. First, the majority leader in the Senate, McConnell, actually didn't calendar this bill last cycle. It was so radical. It was such a radical bill that although it passed out of the House, he said this isn't even going to get floor time in the Senate. It's too radical. Second, in terms of lawsuits, absolutely. We are, as long as we have an independent bench, a federal bench, we have the opportunity, a judicial branch, and Donald Trump put more than 230, I think, federal judges up, and obviously 3 Supreme Court justices. We have a bench that can turn this around and say, no, this bill is patently unconstitutional. And I believe, frankly, it is unconstitutional, both on the free speech grounds and on the federalization of constitutionally state level rights on the election. Now, by the way, to your point, Rebecca, all of these states should be working thoughtfully and with AMAC members, obviously, to try to reform their electoral systems so that they do not get runaway mail-in ballots. They do not get questions and irregularities and anomalies and novelties about the way that we count votes or don't count votes, or harvesting of the votes by third party. By the way, the idea of harvesting third-party harvesting of ballots is, it's the reason that a lot of European countries have outlawed mail-in ballots. They don't use them. And the reason they don't use them isn't because they theoretically said, oh, this might be bad. They actually have suffered fraudulent elections on the national level and said, time out, we're never doing that again. That was a bad choice. So now we're going to institutionalize that process? I don't think that's a good plan. So grand scheme of things, I think people just need to remember that, and this is what AMAC does all the time, I think, and it's just a beautiful thing. We remind ourselves, and we remind each other, and we remind other Americans that common sense, your own private personal notion of integrity, a standard that you expect of your leaders, a standard you expect of the process by which we pick our leaders, is a good template. It's a great touchstone. It's the way we should be thinking about what we value most. And goodness knows, I mean, if we can be turned off, switch the channel, block us by big social media, then this conversation itself wouldn't happen. And, just to show you how antithetical this is to the founding principles of this country, in the Constitutional Convention, and people can read the notes that Madison wrote, he wrote them, and they've been rewritten several times in books that are very readable, like Miracle in Philadelphia, which was written in the 60s, just a compilation of those notes. You learn and you realize two things. The first is that because it was a life and death idea, this idea of the founding of this republic, just like keeping this republic a republic is a life and death kind of idea for future generations, they were all in the pursuit of that truth. They really did not criticize each other for seeking to rethink or
kind of retest whether or not the first 10 amendments were the right. They pulled those 10 out of a group of 60 possible amendments, and they went back and forth. And the second thing is, when they broke into what they called a committee of the whole and they talked with each other, not once did dozens and dozens of founding framers of our Constitution, not once did they criticize another member for changing their mind. Why? Because if you're trying to find out how to save or create a republic, you're not interested in who's going to win and lose personally. You're interested in what is the right thing to do. And
That's right.
that's what AMAC members are, I think, distinguished by. We're interested in the right thing to do. And the right thing to do is to oppose H.R. 1.
Bobby, we need to see more of that kind of leadership and unity in Washington. It is so sad that I see so much division, and we've moved so far away, it seems, from that. So let's pray that that things do get better. AMAC will be following HR 1 closely, and we will be notifying all of our members with a call to action in your inbox. So for anybody listening, go to our website. If you're not signed up to receive our emails, if you go to our website, we've got a very easy way for you to sign up to receive daily notifications. We don't flood your inbox with meaningless information, but this is a call to action. We'll be leaning on our AMAC members to help us with that, and we'll be keeping them apprised as HR 1 moves along. Bobby, thank you so much for being with us today. And I really look forward to having you back with me again, because there is a whole slew of issues that you and I really should be discussing. And this is really great. I appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much. And honestly, I feel that what we do here is a public service, and Americans sometimes know these things in their hearts. And if they took time to study it or read it, they'd know it. But it is nice to have encouragement and to have someone say, yeah, you're not wrong. We really are in a state of peril, and we really do need to be thoughtful and vocal. And that's what you're doing. And I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, Bobby. And to everybody listening with us today, thank you so much for joining AMAC's podcast, Better for America. And we look forward to having you back with us again next time. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.